Did you know the moment that hurts a narcissist the most is not always the moment someone walks away from them? The deepest wound comes when they are finally confronted with the reality that they were the ones who destroyed something genuine, something rare, something they may never experience again. Jung explained that the hidden parts of ourselves, the parts we reject and refuse to acknowledge, often become the strongest forces shaping our lives. For the narcissist, this hidden darkness is connected to inner emptiness, the fear of being truly seen, and the inability to create a relationship built on authentic love. In this video, we will explore the psychological breaking point of a narcissist, the moment their carefully created mask begins to collapse, their influence loses its power, and they realize they did not lose a source of attention but someone who offered real emotional connection. Through the perspective of Jungian psychology, we can understand how narcissists become trapped by their own illusions. They are not only affected by their unresolved wounds, they also create the circumstances that lead to their own emotional destruction. They sabotage the very thing they secretly desire most, a relationship where they can be completely real. So what happens inside their mind when they finally understand what they have lost? Why can your silence, your healing, and your decision to let go create such a powerful impact on their false sense of reality? And what lesson can we take from Jung's understanding of the shadow to break free and reclaim our own peace? Stay until the end, because this journey is not only about understanding how narcissists damage love, but also about discovering how you can transform your pain into strength and step beyond their influence. The narcissist's greatest illusion is the belief that they are always in control. Deep inside their psychological world, there is a contradiction that resembles a tragedy. They believe they are controlling people, emotions, and relationships, but in reality, they are controlled by their own fears and unresolved wounds. Jung explained that anything we refuse to bring into awareness continues to influence our choices from the unconscious. This is exactly what happens with narcissistic behavior. The control they display is not true confidence. It is a defense created from fear, fear of rejection, fear of being forgotten, fear that someone will discover the insecurity hidden behind their carefully designed image. From the outside, a narcissist may appear confident, charming, and highly skilled at understanding emotions. They may know exactly what to say, how to act, and how to create the impression that they are everything someone could ever want. But this is often not genuine emotional connection. It becomes a calculated performance designed to maintain their position and protect their fragile self-image. They begin to treat relationships like a psychological game where the person who controls the emotions of the other person appears to have the power. Yet Jung would describe this as an illusion created by the ego, a false identity built to cover the broken parts they refuse to face. They often use familiar patterns to maintain this illusion: carefully chosen compliments, intense attention at specific moments, emotional distance when they feel threatened, and sudden withdrawal that leaves the other person confused. The more uncertain someone becomes, the more they may seek approval and reassurance. The narcissist then mistakes this emotional dependency for proof of their importance, but in reality, it reveals something much deeper. A person who constantly needs control because they do not feel secure within themselves. Jung described the shadow as the hidden part of the personality that we avoid confronting, even though it continues to influence our actions. For the narcissist, this shadow often contains feelings of emptiness, shame, and deep insecurity. Instead of facing these feelings, they create a powerful external image to hide them. But the irony is that the more desperately they try to control others, the more obvious their internal lack of control becomes. Real love becomes the greatest challenge to this illusion because genuine connection acts like a mirror. It reveals what they have been trying to escape. It shows them that manipulation cannot create true intimacy, and emotional games cannot replace vulnerability. This is where their breaking point begins, because eventually every false image reaches a moment when it can no longer survive against the truth. When genuine love enters the life of a narcissist, it touches the very part of themselves they have spent years avoiding. At the beginning of a relationship, they may appear incredibly captivating. They often know how to study another person, understand their desires, recognize their emotional needs, and reflect those qualities back in a way that feels almost impossible to ignore. They may express feelings you have always wanted to hear, make promises that seem perfectly aligned with your dreams, and create the impression that you have finally found someone who completely understands you. But Jung explained that what we place onto others through projection often reveals something we have not yet confronted within ourselves. In many cases, the narcissist is not truly seeing the person in front of them. Instead, they are responding to the image that person creates for their own ego. They see a reflection that confirms what they want to believe about themselves. What may appear to be deep empathy can sometimes be a way of gaining emotional access and creating influence over another person's feelings. This is where mirroring becomes powerful. The narcissist may seem like they understand your deepest thoughts, your fears, and your dreams because they reflect back exactly what you are longing to experience. But this reflection is not always created from genuine emotional awareness. Sometimes it comes from a desire to create attachment and secure control within the relationship. The feeling of being completely understood becomes the foundation that allows the narcissist to establish emotional influence. This pattern often appears during the stage known as love bombing. The affection feels overwhelming. There may be constant attention, endless praise, intense conversations, and promises about a future together. You may feel chosen, valued, and unlike anyone else they have ever met. However, Jung's understanding of human psychology reminds us that anything overly idealized can sometimes hide a deeper unconscious pattern. Healthy love does not need constant intensity to prove its existence. Real love is consistent, stable, and secure even in ordinary moments. Behind the intensity, an unhealthy dynamic may already be forming. The narcissist places themselves in the role of the person who gives everything, while slowly creating the belief that your happiness depends on their presence. Once you become emotionally attached to the constant attention, their withdrawal begins to have power. Their silence creates confusion because your mind remembers the earlier affection and searches for a way to bring it back. At this stage, the relationship is no longer based on mutual connection, but on emotional conditioning. Jung would describe this as a projection trap. You may believe you have found someone who perfectly matches your soul, but sometimes you are actually seeing your own hopes and desires reflected through the image they created. Eventually, that image begins to crack. The painful truth is that something that had the potential to become genuine love becomes transformed into a struggle for control. Yet even within that painful realization, there is a moment of awakening, because when real love shines directly onto the shadow they have hidden for so long, the person who must finally face the truth is not you, but them. After the intense beginning fades, and once the other person has developed trust and emotional attachment, the narcissist often begins changing the dynamic. The overwhelming attention and affection that once felt constant starts to disappear. Instead of creating security, they begin introducing small moments of confusion and emotional instability. Jung explained that the shadow does not vanish simply because we refuse to acknowledge it. It continues to influence us from hidden places, often appearing through unconscious behaviors. For the narcissist, this hidden side becomes visible through the way they manipulate emotions to maintain power. The warmth slowly turns into criticism disguised as care, such as saying, "You did a good job, but it could have been better." Or they suddenly become distant without explanation, leaving the other person wondering what they did wrong. These behaviors are rarely accidental. They create uncertainty and encourage the other person to work harder for approval. The victim begins searching for ways to return to the loving version of the narcissist they experienced in the beginning. Jung's ideas about the weakening of the ego can help explain this process. When someone's confidence in their own judgment starts to break down, they become more vulnerable to outside influence. The moment a person begins questioning themselves repeatedly, asking, "Am I the problem? Did I make a mistake? Why am I not enough?" they slowly begin giving away their inner authority. The narcissist gains power because the other person starts looking to them for reassurance and answers instead of trusting their own feelings. One of the most damaging forms of manipulation is gaslighting. It is not simply about denying something that happened. It is about creating enough confusion that a person begins doubting their own memories, emotions, and perception of reality. When someone no longer trusts their own understanding, they naturally search for someone else to define what is true. The narcissist often steps into that role because it keeps them at the center of the other person's world. But the control they create is only an illusion. Emotional dominance may create obedience, but it cannot create genuine intimacy. It may silence someone, but it can never create authentic love. Jung believed that transformation often begins through a difficult inner crisis, a moment when a person is forced to confront painful truths, and this is exactly where awakening begins. Eventually, the person who has been manipulated starts recognizing that love should not require constant self-doubt. They begin understanding that their value was never dependent on another person's approval. Every wound created by manipulation can eventually become the beginning of awareness. The narcissist believes they are weakening someone, but they may actually be pushing that person towards self-discovery. And when someone finally remembers their own worth, the control the narcissist once had begins to disappear quietly and completely. In a healthy relationship, love is created through respect, trust, and the freedom for two individuals to remain themselves while growing together. But in the narcissistic mindset, love often becomes confused with possession. Instead of seeing a partner as a separate person with their own identity, dreams, and needs, the narcissist may see them as an extension of themselves, something that exists to support and protect their ego. Jung wrote about the relationship between love and power, explaining that when the desire for control takes over, genuine love begins to disappear. This is the conflict at the center of narcissistic relationships. They may want connection, but they often approach connection through dominance rather than vulnerability. For the narcissist, attachment can become less about sharing life with someone and more about proving their importance. They may believe that if someone truly loves them, that person should always prioritize them, tolerate their behavior, and sacrifice their own needs to maintain the relationship. In this distorted view, love becomes a test of loyalty rather than a space of mutual understanding. They confuse endurance with devotion and control with closeness. What appears to be deep attachment is often a need to secure their position and protect their fragile self-image. Jung described the shadow as the unconscious parts of ourselves that influence our behavior when they remain unexamined. In the narcissist's case, this hidden side can appear through possessiveness, jealousy, and the need to control another person's attention. They may feel threatened when their partner finds happiness outside of them, whether through friendships, personal interests, or moments of independence. To the narcissistic ego, anything that does not revolve around them can feel like a loss of power. They want every source of emotional energy directed back toward maintaining the world they have created around themselves. But real love creates a challenge because genuine love cannot exist through control. Healthy love requires honesty, vulnerability, and the ability to accept that another person is not an object to own. It requires letting someone have freedom while still choosing connection. This is the exact place where the narcissist struggles, because it demands the one thing they fear most: removing the mask and facing their own imperfections. Instead of allowing themselves to become vulnerable, they may destroy the very connection they secretly desire. They turn love into a transaction where they want devotion without equality and affection without accountability. The greatest contradiction is that the harder they try to hold on to someone through control, the faster they push that person away. Love cannot survive where power is the foundation. It can only grow where both people are respected, valued, and free to exist as themselves. Eventually, the illusion begins to collapse. The narcissist believes that ownership creates security, but they discover that possession can never replace genuine connection. And when the other person finally understands this, they stop seeing themselves as someone who must be controlled or chosen. They choose their own freedom. And in walking away, they take back the one thing the narcissist could never force anyone to give: real, authentic love. In a healthy connection, silence can be peaceful. It can create space for reflection, understanding, and emotional healing. But when used by a narcissist, silence often becomes a method of control. They understand that inconsistency can create emotional dependence. One moment they may appear loving and available, and the next they become distant, cold, or unreachable. This unpredictable pattern creates confusion because the other person begins searching for an explanation. Jung believed that when people are unaware of unconscious forces, those forces can shape their lives without their understanding. This is what happens when someone becomes trapped in the cycle of trying to regain the affection they once received. The narcissist's silence is often not accidental. It can become a calculated way to create emotional uncertainty. They understand that affection can make someone feel secure, while withdrawal can create fear and anxiety. This creates a push and pull dynamic where the other person starts focusing more on earning approval than experiencing a balanced relationship. A message, a compliment, or a sudden return after distance can feel incredibly powerful because it provides temporary relief from the emotional tension they created. Over time, these small moments of attention can become like rewards that keep someone attached. The person begins waiting for the next sign of affection, hoping to bring back the connection that existed in the beginning. But the painful reality is that this pattern is not genuine emotional intimacy. It is a cycle that maintains control by keeping someone emotionally uncertain. Jung's understanding of the shadow reminds us that when unconscious fears remain unresolved, they often appear through destructive patterns. The narcissist may believe they are protecting themselves by controlling closeness, but in reality, they are creating the very distance they fear the most. When the unresolved parts of the unconscious begin controlling the relationship, the narcissist struggles to create real emotional closeness because genuine intimacy demands stability, honesty, and consistent presence. This is where the shadow becomes impossible to ignore. The very love that could encourage healing becomes the thing they resist the most. They may respond by withdrawing, attacking, blaming, or destroying the relationship rather than facing themselves. Because accepting genuine love would require accepting the truth that the image they defended for so long was incomplete. The greatest tragedy is that the one thing capable of transforming them is the same thing they push away. Love cannot exist where control is the foundation. It cannot survive where one person must shrink so another can feel powerful. Real love requires equality, honesty, presence, and freedom. When the narcissist chooses power over connection, they lose more than a relationship. They lose the opportunity to experience the very type of love they secretly desire but never allowed themselves to fully receive. When a narcissist first enters someone's life, they often appear like a breath of fresh air. They can seem fascinating, confident, charming, and unusually attentive. They may appear to understand your deepest thoughts, your hidden wishes, and the parts of yourself that you rarely reveal to others. This powerful first impression can make someone believe they have finally met a person who truly understands them. But as Jung explained, the persona is not the complete self. It is the image we create and present to the world. In many cases, the early charm is not a reflection of genuine emotional depth, but a carefully created identity designed to attract and impress. The mask works because it appears effortless. They seem caring, interested, and deeply connected. You feel noticed, valued, and completely understood. But beneath the surface, there may be another process taking place. They watch closely. They learn your emotions, your communication style, your dreams, and your desires. They reflect those things back to you in a way that makes you feel uniquely chosen. Jung described projection as the process of placing our hopes, expectations, and hidden desires onto another person. In this dynamic, you may not only be seeing who they are, but also the version of them you deeply wish to believe in. They play a role that feels authentic because they understand exactly what you long to experience. However, no performance can continue forever. A mask may impress at the beginning, but time eventually reveals what exists underneath. Real life introduces challenges, disagreements, responsibilities, and moments where love requires patience and consistency. This is where the carefully created image begins to weaken. The words that once felt magical begin to lose their emotional meaning. The gestures that once seemed special start feeling repetitive, almost like a script being performed rather than a genuine expression of care. Slowly, you begin sensing that something does not match. The most painful realization is not simply discovering their flaws. It is recognizing that you may have been attached to an image rather than the person behind it. You were connected to the version they presented, the version that made you feel safe, important, and deeply loved. When that illusion breaks, the pain can feel greater than a normal ending because you are not only grieving the relationship, you are grieving the reality you believed existed. From a Jungian perspective, this is the moment when the hidden shadow begins revealing itself. Behind the polished appearance may exist insecurity, fear of rejection, emotional emptiness, and a deep fear of being truly seen. The charm cannot last forever because it was not built from a fully authentic self. It was a protective layer, a way to maintain admiration and avoid vulnerability. But when the mask finally falls, something important happens. The illusion loses its power. Once you recognize the difference between a performance and genuine connection, you cannot return to seeing things the same way. That awareness becomes your freedom. While the narcissist loses the ability to control the image they created, you begin returning to yourself. One of the moments that can affect a narcissist deeply is seeing someone they once influenced become genuinely happy without them. Their greatest discomfort comes from witnessing a person they expected to remain emotionally attached suddenly become peaceful, confident, and complete on their own. In their mindset, control often depends on being needed. As long as someone is seeking their approval, their attention, or their validation, they feel important. But when that person walks away and builds a fulfilling life that no longer depends on them, it creates a painful confrontation with reality. Your happiness becomes a reflection of what they failed to understand, that they were never the source of your worth. For the narcissist, seeing you move forward can feel like a silent reminder that they are not as powerful as they imagined. They may have believed you would always return, always seek answers, or always need their presence. But when you continue growing, healing, and creating a life filled with peace, their old beliefs begin to collapse. The same confidence, self-love, and freedom that you develop become the very things they cannot control. Jung explained that the shadow remains hidden until it is brought into awareness. For the narcissist, the hidden fears often involve being forgotten, being ordinary, and facing the emptiness they have avoided for years. When you stop looking back for their approval, they are forced to encounter the feelings they once covered through control and manipulation. But your purpose is not revenge. You do not need to prove that you are better, stronger, or happier. Your healing itself becomes the answer. A life filled with peace, self-respect, and emotional freedom shows that love was never meant to be based on control. Your value was never created by someone else's attention, and it cannot be taken away by someone else's rejection. Every time you choose yourself, every time you experience joy without needing their presence, you rewrite the story of your life. You move from being someone who was affected by another person's actions to becoming someone who creates their own future. You are no longer defined by what happened to you. You become defined by how you healed, how you grew, and how you transformed pain into wisdom. The greatest freedom is realizing that your happiness does not require anyone's permission. There is a difficult truth that many people struggle to accept. The narcissist does not always fear losing a person as much as they fear what that loss reveals about themselves. When you stop reacting, stop engaging in emotional cycles, and stop allowing their behavior to control your peace, you remove the connection that once supported their false sense of importance. Their ego is often maintained through attention, reactions, and emotional responses from others. When those things disappear, they are left facing the emptiness they tried to avoid. Jung described the shadow as the hidden part of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. When we do not confront it, it continues controlling us from the unconscious. The narcissist often spends years protecting themselves from painful truths by creating an image of superiority and strength. But when someone walks away and no longer participates in that illusion, the image begins to weaken. What hurts is not only losing the person, it is losing the reflection that helped maintain the identity they created. They once depended on that person to confirm their importance, their attractiveness, and their power. But when you choose silence instead of conflict and peace instead of emotional chaos, the performance loses its audience. The illusion can no longer continue in the same way. They may search for new sources of attention or attempt to recreate the same dynamic elsewhere, but somewhere inside they recognize that someone has seen beyond the mask. Once the illusion is exposed, hiding becomes much more difficult. For the person who has survived this experience, however, this moment carries a completely different meaning. Silence is not defeat. Distance is not weakness. Choosing yourself is not failure. It is a return to your own power. You learn that your worth does not depend on someone recognizing it. You learn to create boundaries, protect your peace, and build relationships where respect exists naturally. Do not fear if someone tries to rewrite the story or remove you from their version of events. The most important truth is that you have removed them from the story where they once controlled your emotions. You do not walk away empty. You walk away transformed. You become a stronger, wiser, and more conscious version of yourself. Eventually, you understand that you do not need an apology to heal. You do not need recognition from someone who failed to appreciate your value. Your continued growth, your ability to smile again, and your decision to keep living fully are proof of your strength. Someone may create countless masks to avoid reality, but they cannot change the fact that you have outgrown the situation that once held you back. As Jung's philosophy reminds us, we are not only shaped by what happens to us, we are shaped by what we choose to become afterward. Your wounds do not define you. Your healing does. Your strength does. Your ability to transform suffering into self-awareness does. The greatest victory is often quiet. It does not need to be announced or proven. It exists deep within you through the peace you create. One day, you will realize that your silence was never emptiness. It was a powerful statement. You chose peace over chaos. You chose boundaries over manipulation. You chose your own light over someone else's darkness. And that choice is something no one can take away from you. You deserve a love that feels safe. You deserve a life where your heart is not constantly fighting to be understood. Do not only survive your experiences, grow beyond them, live fully, live with courage. Become the proof that even after difficult seasons, the human spirit can rise again. If these words connected with your journey, continue walking with us as we explore more insights about healing, self-worth, and emotional strength. Every step forward is a reminder of one powerful truth. You choose freedom, you choose peace, and you choose to step out of someone else's shadow and fully into your own light. Your story is still unfolding, and the next chapter belongs to the stronger version of you.